Okay, I'd like to do an overview here of the extensive rebuild of the Tascam 112 Mark II, the modifications and upgrades to the deck, which are many. First off here, I want to check my wound flutter, my flutter numbers, my speed, using my RCA 3000 Hertz test cassette. It's quite an old one. It has a lot of dropouts, but I still use it. It's still a good tape. I just have to get through the dropouts. There will be some spikes when it does hit those, and I'll just reset it and watch it again. And there was one right there. I just need to get past them. I like to use the whole tape and not just find sections of it that work, so I deal with it as best I can. Well, this will be the beginning of the tape, and we're in that 0.06 range, 0.05, 0.06. This deck does have a brand new motor and an upgraded and modified pulley arrangement that's shown in another video, but it's a brass pulley that's replacing the plastic pulley from the factory, and it's also got larger flanges on it, so there's more weight all around. So here we are closer to the middle of the tape. I do expect better than factory specs on this. It has a factory belt. It has been thoroughly cleaned, lubed, adjusted, and I do expect it to be better than what the factory specs were on it. On this particular deck, in the service manual, the factory spec is 0.06, and I am really kind of maxing out at 0.06, and I get a lot better than that through different areas. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Let's check the speed. Now on these, the speed trim pots are on the left side of the deck underneath that rack gear, which has to be removed in order to get to the trim pots. And I find that really ridiculous. So this slot here, I mill into these to help make that easier. The top one is for the fixed speed, and the bottom one adjusts the pitch control so that you can kind of set that front knob where you want it and then zero it in and get your full 3% or 12%, plus or minus 12% pitch control on this. I'm kind of demonstrating that, but my instrument here is limited to plus or minus 4%, so that's as far as I can go. I'm just showing here that both of them are very consistent. They're operating correctly. And my speed is consistent front to back. Front of the tape to the end of the tape. In this particular test, it was somewhere around 0.07, 0.010%, or 0.10%, 0.07 to 0.10% variation from the beginning to the end of the tape, and that's actually very good. Belt drives can be very consistent on speed, sometimes even more so than direct drives if they're not quartz locked. And just testing the flutter again at this point in the tape. And I'm happy with these numbers. Do a frequency response test on it now. I've got a newly opened TDK SA and a used Mk2 XL2. This series doesn't have all the fine tuning adjustments that its younger or older siblings did, and so it can be optimized for one tape extremely well, and the others are they just can't be as finely tuned. So I chose the TDK SA Type 2 tape to optimize with. It's unlikely that anybody would be recording metal tapes on this. It does an excellent job on the tape it was biased for, but you can't just throw anything in this one and expect it to be the way it would be on a deck that has all the controls to optimize each particular tape. So this is the trace, the scope trace on the electronics as it's recording, laying down the frequencies on the tape. And then this is the actual playback frequency response from the tape. The head on this deck was lapped, and so I'm getting good response out of it. You kind of follow the cursor along and see I've got a drop out there on the left. That's the scope, it's not the tape. It does that occasionally. So it's about 17, it's going to be about 17 kilohertz on the high end is where we drop off below 3 dB. And about 20 or 21, I think, is where the signal drops off. 21. Okay, so 22 is where the signal drops off. And then on the bass end, minus 3 dB at about 28. I've got a 27 and a 29, and it looks like it'll be right between those two. So somewhere between about 28 and 17 on the TDK SA. I've spent quite a bit of time dialing this in. Numbers are good and they're fine to look at, but in the end, it's about how it sounds, and it sounds excellent now. So here's my XL2. Be very similar. Levels down maybe just a little bit. Of course, this tape has also been recorded and played back many times. The other one was freshly opened. And so it's exactly the way I expect it to perform. The electronics in the deck are, you can kind of walk the traces out there and see them. It's about 25 to 26 kilohertz is what the response is of the deck electronics, which is excellent. This will be right channel on top, left channel on the bottom. The right channel is dots and the left channel is dashes. And these are step frequencies. This is not obviously pink noise or anything like that. I'm only doing the top end on this because the bass won't change. So run out here to 16.5, 17.5, almost identical to the SA TDK. So I'm happy with that. Now what we want to know is what the distortion levels are at these bias settings. So I'll record 10 seconds or so, something like that, on the tape and play it back and see what our distortion levels are. You can see the meters deflecting there at 0 dB. Let's hit the return to 0. Okay, and there we are at 1% or less, which is my own personal goal. I think that's a little bit better than what the factory allows, or what the factory spec is on it. I find 1% at 0 dB or less to typically be inaudible. Here's the TDK. Should be a little bit better. All right. And it is slightly better. Being an unrecorded tape and being biased for this tape, it makes sense that it's a little bit better. It's what I expect. All right, let's have a look at our noise floor. Basically recording no signal. Give it a few seconds. Yeah, let's play it back. So we have around 55.7 and 56.7 minus 56.7 dB. Very good, very acceptable number. This is, of course, Dolby off. This is just straight. And it would probably do a little bit better than that if I turned all my lights and fluorescent fixtures and everything off. But I need light to make a video. Yeah, do the Mk2. Basically doing these two tapes because I think they're probably the most popular that people would be recording on a deck like this at this point. Yeah, very similar results on a tape that has been used a lot and played back a lot. Those numbers make me happy. As I said, I've done extensive work on this deck. I'll list it in the listing. I'll detail it in the listing. There's really probably too much to go through in a short video. It's been a full recap with very high quality audio grade capacitors. The quad switches upgraded. There have been a number of other upgrades and improvements. Some of them have been detailed in some of the previous videos about this deck. The overall result is that it sounds excellent. It's very musical, it's quiet. It meets my goal of a particular threshold I set for myself for sonics. And a lot of that is the new capacitors, of course, but a big part of that also is dampening resonance and shielding in this deck, and isolation too, because there are parts of it that just needed to be isolated, that were metal touching metal where it shouldn't be, and things like that. So just a little flyby view. I'm sorry it's shaky here. I thought I could make it look like a drone or something. Here's just a little slideshow, just snapshots that I took during the process of rebuild. There are quite a few details on the, I think, 2 previous videos on this one. But of course, not everything is shown, so I just take little snapshots in between and make a little slideshow in the end here. Of course, the head was relapped. Full disassembly. The only board that didn't get fully recapped on this was the meter board, and there was no reason for that. These are new lamps, factory spec lamps. I think I mentioned this is one of the few decks I can still get a factory Tascam or TAC belt for. That makes a big difference in the flutter numbers, stability. The complete disassembly, complete cleaning. This is electrical contact enhancement on all of the connectors. Cosmetic detailing. These are vibration dampeners, Teflon, pure Teflon vibration dampeners on the audio board power caps. This is the relapped head. This was one of the major upgrades and enhancements in the head assembly to reduce resonance there and shielding. That's the factory plastic elliptical pulley, capstan motor pulley. This is building a new round and concentric brass pulley of increased mass and angular momentum in order to smooth out, hopefully, and it seemed to have worked, to smooth out the flutter on the deck. There was a full video on this one. I think the one before this one was the making of that brass pulley. That's the new brass pulley compared to the factory plastic pulley. And there it is on the new capstan motor. Now, how'd that get in there? This was replacing on the power board the thermal grease. And then there's that Swiss cheese divider between the two power supply board and the audio board. This is actually a pretty important improvement here. This is a dampening and isolation on the pillar for the tape transport. That did a lot for resonance and vibration reduction also. Yeah. Again, the shield, transformer secondary shield. It's still open on the two back sides for heat dissipation, but it's shielding from the components, especially the audio components. Of course, that's what I'm looking at. New quad switches and WEMA caps. That's just that new pulley installed. And much more than I can mention here, but it will be detailed out in the listing. So thank you for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed this.